Tonight we are recording chapter 1 of Butterfly Being. I Am Who I Am. It is the book that I recently completed after a laborious year of writing and living. Chapter 1 is by far the hardest chapter to revisit. As its title indicates, survive, triggering event, I look back at a pivotal moment in my life that changed everything I thought I knew. As I look backwards to move forward, I have maintained the integrity of the story, my story, even when it hurts, even when its lessons seek to teach me further who I am. I have become comfortable being while becoming, and I offer to myself the gentleness of looking back forgivingly. And I ask that you receive it the same. Butterfly Being, I Am Who I Am. Chapter 1, Survive, Triggering Event. Quote, if you must look back, do so forgivingly. If you must look forward, do so prayerfully. However, the wisest thing you can do is be present in the present, gratefully. By Maya Angelou. I recall being sad and lonely in those first few days after that distressing night. I was so sad and so lonely. The hands that tried to claim my final breaths from me, that which was not his to claim, were the same hands on the same arms that so often held me softly and encouraged me to reach further, climb higher, be bigger, and seek better. Together, our love gave birth to two mini-we's. We found us as we and our, as me and mine. Then in one night of extreme violence, closure brought to us a unplanned end, perhaps only because the planned end had failed to see its fruition. Just like that, an end's birth brought a new beginning, and a new day was born at life's end. One night would usher in a change so fierce, with the might of its surety, that the commitment of my soul to my Creator in that moment was absolute in its utterance. Simply put, I had accepted the death knock on my door. I had not chosen it. I had not deserved it. I had not comprehended it. But here it was, wanting me. The least I could do was ensure that my soul made it home to its Creator. You know what's funny? And how I know that the Creator has a sense of humor? I always thought about when I would fully surrender myself to my Maker. I always knew it would be a firm utterance of verbal commitment at my end's approach, whenever that would be. I unconsciously hoped that I would be granted the time and vocal ability to utter my commitment into existence. I never said it out loud, never wrote it, just knew it. I think I even felt shame about knowing for sure that only in that moment would I commit fully. Sure, I believed in truth that governs my being, that governs all being. I believed it so much that I was hopeful that I would meet my Maker. But what is hope without action? Why not now? Why was I waiting? What was I waiting for? In essence, I was waiting for life to pass me by. Was not the goal to make it into heaven, which comes after death? But was living so great without the seeking that finds truth now? What was I missing by not seeking truth now? Was I missing finding it? Maybe I was scared that I could not live up to my Creator's demands. But honestly, I had no idea what creation demanded of me. It seems weird to be afraid of that which is not known. Maybe I was ashamed that the Bible never really connected with me, that it was not personal, that so many of the words and parables just did not ring true in a meaningful way to me. Maybe I feared that I was not worthy of such love and promise. So many maybes. Whatever the driving cause or reason, my truth hit me like a freight train that night. Ironically, it was a truth that I always knew I would not face until my end presented itself. And as I knew it to be true, having told no one but myself in private thought, I found the words and the conviction of them. I commit my soul to you, my Maker. I said that out loud, and I meant it. Meaning that which we utter is much more powerful than just uttering words of convenience without conviction. I believed myself. And as you believe, so it will be. And so it was. And now it is. It was that night that saw the truth of my impermanence, met with the commitment of my soul into the arms of creation. The reason and circumstance around where and how I found myself at the strangling hands of my love are really inconsequential in the grand sense of the lessons learned. The reality is whatever the end circumstance was, that was when I planned to fully commit my being to my truth. What a sad realization, that only in the end of my physical being could I clearly see myself as one with my truth. I thank God that He is not limited in His interpretation of using what we think as the limited roadmap of our being. I am so thankful to understand that all things work for good. I am so grateful that He has a sense of humor and a holiness that corrects our vision. I thank Him that I am still here and that I am now fully awake and driving the car and being the star in the film of me. That was not always the case. I was so checked out of my role in the story of my life for so long. I did not even realize it. That autopilot was on, and I was sleeping through the journey of my being. After that night, I found myself in a daze. I recall sitting and staring at nature for hours at a time, watching the water flow at the riverside, or watching the leaves on the trees, seeing their shadows dancing to the whispers of the winds. It reminded me of bodies of water where the surface rippled to the same. They danced in the breeze, many seemingly becoming one until the dance stops. The winds subsided until the dance began again. I get lost in the repetition, starting and stopping over and over again. Endings and beginnings coexisting in harmonious union. The passage repeating on and on, again and again, one becoming many, many reverting to one, single, plural, single again. I recall thinking about oneness and many. That thought that while I was one, I am all too. I am all, and all contains me. While I am singular, the one that is I is also part of many. I enjoy dancing with the wind in synchronicity to the leaves of the trees. I had many of those moments during my transformation, lost in this weird way of being. I was caught between grief and numbness. Numbness often brought an unknowing surrender to deep contemplative thoughts, which clashed badly with the grief of my sorrow, but would usher in a silence that I became fond of. No thoughts, no noise. In those moments, I saw life in everything. The triggering event to my being, which shifted me from unconscious to conscious awareness, happened one night 7 years ago. I will caveat that it took me 6 years from that night to my surrender. 6 years of being in darkness and a number of life-altering events to bring me to my full moment of surrender. The night started out with my love coming home late evening. We rarely had any plans, and this night was no different. I was always wearing the hat of mommy. I worked from home and had since my son was a toddler. By the time my daughter was born, I was full-time work from home. Being alone whilst together was what I knew well. I did not recognize fully the person that showed up at our home that night. He had been drinking. That was abnormal. He was not much of a drinker. I was the drinker in our relationship. It was not a secret. I enjoyed drinking very much. I knew something was off. I had had a long day, prepping for being away on travel the upcoming week, which included packing myself up and preparing a week's worth of nighties, day clothes for school, and everything in between each rising sun for the kids. I was efficient before I left for those trips, leaving no guesswork or room for error in my systematic approach to ensure a smooth experience while I was away. Each child had clothes for each day hung on a hanger in their respective closets with options for weather variations, a jacket over a short-sleeved tee, extra pair of undies in case of a nutball, and pajamas. That repeated for as many days as I would be gone. I never really left instructions for doctors and important stuff. I fully expected that if there was a problem, I would be contacted. And I was the only one with relationships with those who would need to be called as it related to anything of consequence. I had also been preparing the whole house, with the exception of myself, for the funeral of my love's uncle, as it would take place the Monday following my Sunday departure. My departure was less than 12 hours away from the time he arrived at home. I had taken a break during my marathon of prepping to go grab my sister's vacuum cleaner, which she was ready to toss. I insisted it likely only suffered from a minor ailment, such as a broken belt, and assured her that I could likely fix it. That says a lot about me. I am a fixer. I think it's fair to say that if I were a fairy, I'd be a tinker. Apart from that, I spent the entire day readying the troops. When he came home, I acknowledged him, but proceeded with my long list of to-dos. At some point in the evening, I went downstairs, conceding to the fact that I would get little to no sleep before my 6 a.m. flight. I could steal an hour or so in his company so he would not feel abandoned before I abandoned him for a week. I really enjoyed the yearly conference that I was going to. This year, I was the business project director for the effort my company outsourced our infrastructure build to, and they were the holders of the conference. As such, not only was I attending the conference, but had front row seats at all the evening festivities, which candidly put me in my element. I was hopeful that things would run smoothly on the home front, so I would not be subjected to calls all throughout the day and night. I had spent many hours FaceTiming my little ones when they got home from school, reading them to sleep at night, and waking to their cries after having had a nightmare while away. Not being subjected to so many of those calls was certainly wishful thinking in retrospect. Feeling a pull to spend time with him before it got too late, I headed downstairs to find him. The conversation between he and I quickly turned sour, him impressing upon me his strong thoughts about a member of my family, and an assumption that was candidly very personal and not any of his or my business. I did not understand why we were discussing it and could not justify his strong stance either way. Needless to say, the argument only got worse. We had just a few days before had a physical fight in front of the kids that was pretty nasty. That had never happened in front of the kids. In fact, it was only the second time in our just shy of 15 years together that things got physical. He and I had talked about the fight that happened earlier that week. During that discussion, he recalled the words I uttered so clearly after that first instance, that if he ever lifted a hand at me again, it would be the end. Now, he asked if I was leaving him. That question was loaded. Technically speaking, it would mean he'd have to leave. I owned the house. He had insisted that I buy it a few years earlier, and it was solely in my name. He did not contribute in one way to the purchase. According to his plan, He would buy a home in the future, so we'd have investment property. Everything in our lives was held together by the glue and the finances that I provided. So that question was loaded because it asked if I was putting him out, if I was breaking up our family. I think we both knew, in spite of the complications of splitting, that that's exactly where my decision would land. The hard part of the equation for me was that he had nothing, and putting him out meant he left with nothing and nowhere to go. As such, and hesitating to face that harsh reality, I had asked for time to consider the matter, but time was not on my side. I believe in retrospect, he knew that he'd never let me make that decision, knowing the same end I struggled with. In essence, it would be easier for him to claim what was mine, the hours that I had built. Thus, his choice was to end me, which in some way maintained the illusion of us. I remember thinking about that choice that night. What are you going to do with yourself after you successfully kill me? What's going to happen to our kids? I don't recall asking those questions out loud, but I remember him answering the unasked question, telling me not to worry. The kids would know how much of a bitch I was. I assume he did not plan on killing them or himself. His assurances did not, however, stop me from issuing an order of protection and prayer over my kids after I committed my soul to my Maker. I might be meeting the Creator tonight, but I had no intentions on seeing them there. Not yet. He felt validated in his actions. Baffling. Even if all that he thought was true, and for the record, it was not. But if it was, why not walk away? Could the fear of walking away from me with nothing seem heavier a burden to bear, more unbearable than the weight of killing me to maintain the semblance of having? Anywho, I digress. Based on our original discussion, he knew I would not put up with physical abuse. It's kind of ironic that I fed the beast by putting up with verbal abuse. Again, retrospect is a hindsight. He knew as clearly as I did that a second physical event would lead to my leaving forever. The first event happened in year 1 and nearly broke us at that early start. The third and last would occur this night. I've asked myself more times than I can count, why did I go back to him the first time? For now, I'll just say, when the devil shows himself, believe him when he pronounces who he is. I should have learned the first time, but in fairness, be it him or any life lesson, I was not all that receptive to learning lessons the first time they presented themselves. I left and went into hiding, and he found me and whispered all the sweetness of promise in my ear about never hitting me again. I believed him. I believed the good could tame the bad if the desire was strong enough. I still believe that, but I failed to realize that my belief does not automate into the reality of anyone outside of myself. That which you believe is true for you. I was always a little lost in the softness of his stare. His eyes had a depth that intrigued and tugged me. I would often get lost in them. But I was no sucker. I was smart and would not have chosen an abusive relationship. I'd always been in very happy, kind relationships, if not flawed by the ways of combining lives and stories and truths. So when he promised he would not hit me, we both knew that going against that promise would break us. When the incident occurred the second time, just nights before this night, we both knew that we were changed. He admitted knowing that he had broken his promise and asked me how I planned to proceed. I asked for 2 weeks to consider all options before deciding. I guess we both knew in our hearts that there was no coming back from what had transpired. I never really gave much thought to what had changed. Our arguments had gotten uglier, more heated in the past months. The tension between us could be cut with a knife. I would find out that night what the catalyst was, and it would shake me to my core. It woke me up. In the end, we ended up in my home office on the upper level of the split basement. While the dialogue that came out of his mouth was filled with force and anger, it was not important. Left on its own, it would have been just another argument. I am not in any way undermining the danger and its explosiveness and ability to poison love's ability to be present, but it would not have altered my course. As a matter of fact, it would have made it easier to get to the decision that was already looming. It was the change in his presence in an instant that ushered in that change. His words, his voice, they still hold the familiar discord of danger. It's just me and you. You hear me? He said. No, it's not. I almost whispered as I lost some of the conviction of my earlier fight. I was stunned by the change in energy in the room and the eeriness in his tone. It's me and you and the kids and our families, I ranted, not sure what to make of his statement or this new energy in the room. I knew that I needed to inject the presence of others into this moment. He proceeded to sit back in my main office chair, my seat of power, and look into the exposed closet of my office. It took me a minute to realize what in the closet he was looking at as he spoke his next words, the words that assured me that I was firmly planted in danger. Staring at the object in the closet, he told me that he understood why he had done what he had done. Surely not, I thought. as I was also now staring at the object of his understanding, the jacket in the closet. The jacket belonged to his former best friend, the best friend who had killed his girlfriend and then himself. Unbeknownst to me at the time, that dreadful event had occurred almost 5 years to the date from this very night. I recall watching him as the argument and all of its meaningless noise stood still. I knew that my life was what was in danger, and I knew that none of the stuff that we were arguing about mattered at all. The violence that followed was unfathomable. The abuse cold and uncaring. The intent clear. It did not matter how vicious his acts were. He did not intend for me to see the light of another day. So his callous acts and indifference in beating and bruising me held no weight to the ultimate act that he had to complete. He talked about it with ease, a knowing, his words like a knife piercing my soul, his physical acts unforgiving and brutal. I remember him picking up and tossing the solution compartment of the steam mop at my head, hitting the target and falling to the floor, me already in a state of shock. Can't recall feeling the pain, just the recollection of panic. He understood why his friend had killed that lovely young lady. He understood the act of killing. I was a little thing back then, roughly 120 pounds. I was a little thing back then, roughly 120 pounds at 5'4". He was bigger. I recall the officer being surprised by my having survived a fight against his impressive frame. I had never seen him so patiently angry. Raging angry, yes. I had seen him passionately lovely. This was truly the unadorned opposite. He was convinced that I was cheating on him, had a whole story that was validated by himself in its curation, a who, a when, and many wheres. He knew details about this man's life that I did not. He had been stalking and misinterpreting for months. My travels, all those moments where I was being the power player in the room, he concluded were trips to be with my man and his fictional relationship that he had conjured and literally validated with no facts. He told me all about it before he attempted, not once, nor twice, but 3 times to choke the life out of me. I remember him demanding sex between rounds. I can still hear his voice yelling violently, "Give me some pussy," while attempting to fully rip my pants off in his determination to have me one last time, or as proof of some sort. I remember giving every ounce of the strength left in me to the fight to not let him have me in that way. I won that battle, but oh, did that make him angry. It moved from that to strangulation attempt 3. I remember thinking later, maybe if I had given him some, he would have calmed the fuck down. But even in my dismay, I could not conceive of having this stranger in me. Having him on me was disgusting enough. But mostly, I remember being tired, dazed, confused, and tired. I also remember sensing that we were not alone in the room. The spirits of my loved ones past were present. My uncle, my grandma, and my aunt and angels were very present, all fighting or ready to receive me. I could not differentiate the why, but I felt them there. In retrospect, I perceive it was a holy war that they were fighting on my side. The age-old battle of good versus evil. When the third round commenced, I was tired. I knew that I did not have anything left to fight with. I was depleted. My body was operating on adrenaline at that point. I tried to fight, but at this point, I knew it was over. I had managed to move my voice beyond uttering sounds to uttering the prayer that committed my soul to my Maker. Praying for protection over my kids and releasing my ghost and the surrender of weakness of my now fightless, exhausted body. I remember thinking as I left myself, I can't believe I'm going to die like this, as I surrendered to the cloud of nothingness that awaited.